All right. Hey, Alyssa. Welcome. I always find doing these intros because we've just been talking for a few minutes and then I got to pretend like we're starting off. But how's
Who are
it for
you
you?
again?
I know, right? I ask myself that question almost every morning. Who am I again? What's going on? What day of the week is it? How's everything going in your corner of the universe?
Everything is going absolutely brilliantly. Super pumped to be here again. It's only like the second time we've chatted. This is fantastic,
Well, I'm,
but it's
I'm
good.
glad.
Like
I'm glad to hear it.
everything, I'll be honest. I'm not going to talk about day job. Day jobs suck, right? But it's like I've been highly stressed, overworked in a day job. So any opportunity I get to talk about our hobbies, whether it be miniatures or it's like what games we're playing over the weekend, I'm regalvanized. It's like I've just been to the gym. I'm pumped.
All right, awesome. Yeah,
What about
we don't
you,
need to
man?
talk
What have
about
you been
the
up to?
day job. I had my game. Was it last night? I had my game? No, it must have been the day before last. Gosh, I just lose track of time. But I was looking forward to this one. I was going to stream this afternoon, and I usually do kind of a lunchtime stream. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna gather my strength so that I can give it all out here, give myself a little bit of a break. I do enjoy the daily streams though, and I've been able to kind of work that in. I just started a new job, and the onboarding is super slow, which just meant that for me, it's given me lots of free time since I don't have access to anything. I can't do anything. So,
Okay,
and they're still
well,
paying
that's
me. So
okay.
hey,
That's good. That's the
it's
best
going to
time.
end very soon. They just started getting the documentation for how to log in. So I'm gonna be have to get ready for that life change. But so far, so good. So you mentioned before we started, you got some stuff in the hopper. You mentioned some things you can't talk about, but I know you were super excited last time we spoke about working on for some stuff for Chaosium, and it sounds like one of those for them you can talk about. So let's
Yeah,
hear it. What do you
so
got?
as a cartographer, I'm really pumped just to work for any sort of big name company. I should say most big name companies, but particularly Chaosium. I love Call of Cthulhu a huge amount. So when they reached out to me a few months ago and were like, "Do you want to work on some maps?" I'm like, "Hell yeah!" We haven't even talked money or project yet, and I'm like, "Sure, no problem at all." Because it's chaos and I love them. I actually collect their books. I back to first and second edition boxed sets, things still in shrink. I've got a growing collection of Call of Cthulhu and some pretty rare things too. So to have them reach out to me and to have the opportunity to do something for them, I mean, that's rare, man. I mean, that's almost like that's my lineage there in a way. When I die, at least I still left some maps in the Chaosium books. That's how I will live on a little bit. That's how I tend to view it. So I was
Absolutely.
super pumped when they reached out to me. And one of them is under kind of a little bit of an NDA because they have their own NDA with someone else. But I've just finished that map, very, very, very close to it, even though it's a mystery map to everyone. And it's come out looking pretty good. And it's a very different style for me. But the next one I'm doing is actually a Gaslight London map for them. And that will be fun. And that's the first time I've actually said that on air, by the way, to anyone.
Oh,
No one else knows that it's a Gaslight
exclusive.
London map. That's an
Nice. So,
exclusive.
so we're talking, what is this, Victorian era, late
Yep.
19th century, Jack the
Yep.
Ripper?
Yep.
Nice. Can you
Now it's
speak
going to be
about kind of? Okay, no, go ahead.
well, it's going to be a challenge, man. I mean, if you think about it, it's not like I could just pop open Google Maps and look at London, right? Because it's changed. So I'm going to have to try and figure out a resource to like, okay, so what was London like 150 years ago? What roads existed then that don't now? I mean, there's no highways and things like that, right? There's no B roads or anything like that or motorways. And London has plenty of those major roads going on. I've got to figure out what came before. So that's going to be an interesting challenge.
So, are they asking for kind of a real I mean, are they expecting you to delve into historical maps from
It's
late 19th century?
there's going to be something. There's going to be something. I'm going to have to do a little bit of digging around, without a doubt. It's like I think most clients expect it to be pretty good. Now, if we're drawing in a London, um, there's only so much you can do. You can't draw every single alleyway and everything like that. So there's a degree of fuzziness already. But if I do a big B road going right through the middle of it that exists today, they're probably going to go, So I'm going to have to do something.
Yeah, people are picky with that stuff. I always laugh when I go to IMDb and someone will say, well, this movie was supposed to take place in 1969, but the A5 through Bristol wasn't built until 1971, so it's like, points removed.
There's part of me that like hates that type of person, but there's part of me that deeply admires them too. You'll get these World War II films or something, and all of the main characters are looking up as they can hear engines of planes going overhead, and some wise ass will write in and say, well, actually, those are planes from 1950 flying at 50,000 feet.
Yeah.
And it's
you
like,
listen carefully at the engine, you can tell that,
Exactly. A part of you is like, oh, come on, dude. But another part of it's like, how do you know that? And I look brains on people. I'm a huge fan of intelligence. So part of me is like, that's cool.
Yeah, one of the best ones I remember reading was from Titanic, the movie, and it had something to do with where the character of Jack was from, and it had to do with the fact that the lake or wherever he said he was from, in, I don't know, Minnesota, wherever it was a man-made lake and wasn't in existence till like the year after the Titanic sank. And it was just such a very specific detail that has no importance, just a little, one half a line about like, I'm from Lake Minnetonka. And they're like, oh, Lake Minnetonka wasn't, didn't exist in 15. It was drilled or whatever in 1918. It's like, all right, buddy.
I love that. And it's funny enough, I know we're going to probably talk about a little bit of Call of Cthulhu later.
Absolutely.
But, I run Call of Cthulhu, and I like to ensure that what I put in my game is actually period accurate. So I can actually respect that type of observation, because I don't feel right adding in something into the game if it didn't exist at the time. So I'm always kind of doing a little bit of double checking myself so that I can actually truly relate to. Now, on the flip side, I don't know if you like the film or not, but the film Fury, the tank movie, that has a real last surviving king tiger in it.
Oh, wow.
It is the only king tiger in the world that is still mobile. And the owner loaned it to the film crew, and like you see it like behind grass and everything because it's actually on a proper prepared surface, behind the scenes as they gently trundle it into shot, and to hear the engine going, and it's the last surviving tiger in the world. It's just like goosebump territory, But someone was like, well, actually, the aerial on that particular tiger means that it was a model that only served in Northern Africa and wouldn't be in Europe. Well, okay, that's cool. That's cool that you know that. But come on, dude, it's the last moving tiger in the world. Can't we just give it a pass because of that?
No pass. The internet gives no free passes.
No passes.
No nothing. So have you done something like kind of that Gaslight era before, whether it's just fully fantasy or whether it's a map of another city? Or is this totally new ground?
This is new ground. And honestly, the minute the Chaosium came onto the radar for me, it was going to be new ground after that anyway. I've done Call of Cthulhu maps. I've done them several times for Golden Goblin. But we're talking now a different era, right? And we're talking like very plain Jane, sort of black and white maps. This is going to be a full color sort of double spread type of thing. This is a type of thing where you open up the middle of the book, map of London.
So this is like the featured.
This is
piece.
The featured thing. So I knew then it was going to be a little bit different. Have I done double page spreads? Yes. Have I done fold out maps? Yes, of course I have. But actually capturing a real life city like London, and not in my normal style, because you've seen my style. It's very fantasy-esque. It's it's very clearly hand drawn, and I think Call of Cthulhu needs something that actually almost feels like you are living in like the 1850s, and you've got this map in your hand, and I think it needs to feel that way. So there's going to be a certain style I have to.
I was going to ask you. So I was thinking I was just thinking off the top of my head whether you were going to do it just kind of super stylized, with the gaslight, like it's going to be a night map, and you're really going to be highlighting the fact of how all the gas lamps, right? How it lit London and what, of course, it left unlit. Or were you going to go with a real period look of this is what maybe a surveyor's map of London would have looked like in 1850, 1860, and sort of adapt that style. Right.
I'm
So
doing that. I'm
doing
doing
that
that.
one.
I'm doing that. I think, by the way, the alternative, like it's almost like it's clearly done in the modern era, but it looks almost like, I don't know, almost like you're on a computer game map and there's little lights, lighting up the city. And you could even imagine Jack the Ripper going down the street. That, I think that there's a huge merit to that. Huge merit. But I like doing the period things. I mean, I am a huge fan of history. And if I can capture something that looks like it's from 1925 or 1850, I actually get off on that. I like trying to actually draw like someone from 200 years ago type of deal.
Yeah. I feel like for a Call of Cthulhu game, also that kind of surveyor's map is just also is that point of immersion. Because you know that you're not, if you were, I don't know, you go to the library or wherever you might be able to get a map of a certain part of London, you're not going to get a hyper stylized map. Whereas a hyper stylized map might help you feel the atmosphere more. I feel like if I was going to get something as a handout or I was going to look at it in the book, what's going to make me feel like an investigator in the time is getting a kind of a period style map. I mean, that's just me. Even though the other one seems really cool from a certain point of view. Have you started? Where are you? Has it just begun, or where are you in the process with that?
Very, very early stages of that one. Oh, and by the way, they've given me the green light to actually stream it too. So I'm going to actually start working on it sort of publicly. But have I done that yet? No, I've actually got to go off. I mean, I actually did some preliminary research, got the styles that I thought I kind of liked, got the colors and things I think I'm going to go with. But have I broken ground on it yet? No. There's going to be a little bit of back and forth because what I do is, let's say for the sake of argument, what town are you from?
New York.
Perfect. New York would be an awesome one to draw. New York has a lot of history. It's a fascinating place. So let's say for the sake of argument, you contact me and say, okay, I want to draw New York, 1850s style. For starters, cool project, bro. Let's do it. But one of the first things that I'm going to start coming back to you is like, so what needs to be actually featured on the map? And I asked the same question of Chaosium, right? Because that determines the scale of what we really have to squeeze onto the page, right? Because if you say that, let's say Harlem and Queens need to be on there, but also Statue of Liberty all the way down at the bottom, oh, and by the way, we need to get all of Manhattan Island on there. If you start talking, if we're going to be squeezing in like all of the details to try and make sure we got everything to the north on there, but everything to the south as well. Well, if you said, actually, this just focuses in on the Italian area of Manhattan Island, well, shoot, now we can cut off everything else. So I'm going to do that first. And I'm probably going to get a rough map of London sort of drawn, figure out where their key points of interest are going to be located on that, ensure they fit on there. I always then look at the fold, make sure there's nothing critical that's falling on the fold line, right? Move things around a little bit. Then I'll kick that back to them and say, is this scale looking good? Are you okay with? Then I really jump into the heavy duty drawing. So we're probably about a week out, or a few days out of really breaking ground on this thing. But
are you going to stream even those very early steps, or are you waiting till you get the basic?
Maybe they sent across some details to me the other day, and I've basically got to go through the POIs, and probably would that be worth streaming? Maybe me sort of finding where those POIs are in London and overlaying them on a map and kind of getting a sense for things. Maybe we'll see.
Do they have some good digitized resources of that maps of that era? I mean, I know places like the British Museum and I think the library and stuff. They've got a lot of stuff that you can find.
I'm hoping so. One of the great resources I've been using recently, Library of Congress. It's like, holy heck. If you are not familiar, you should be. If you're into gaming, Library of Congress, especially if you're gaming in the real world to any degree. Like I found a map of 1925 Cairo and Egypt, perfect for the game I happen to be running. Super, super, super high resolution. It's like it would just blow your socks off. So I'm going to be going to the likes of there, and I'm going to be seeing if they got any 1800s maps.
I
of
want to say the
London.
British, either, I forget whatever the Library of Congress, but the British version, or maybe the British Museum has a Flickr feed that's just also got a tons and tons of different just art and things, which is worth
I'm going to be
checking out. I try
checking
to
them
keep a whole
out,
bunch
believe
of that
me.
stuff. If I can remember the link, if I have it, I'll send it to you, because they have their Flickr's just got an immense amount of stuff, and again, it's like just super
Okay,
high res
cool.
and super whatever. Well, that's awesome. Um, I guess I keep wanting to ask you details about it, but I will not. I will not ask more details. I did want to say, when you're drawing your own maps, and maybe this works for this one too. How many iterations of kind of that initial sketch work do you usually do before you get into, okay, I'm ready to now go in all the details? And I guess maybe just assuming you're doing it for your own, as opposed to going back and forth with a creative person on a collaborator. If like you're just doing your own map that's either for your own product or for your home game, how many of those initial sketch do you feel like before you're like, okay, now I'm ready to dive into the details? I feel like I don't do enough of that, and I end up halfway into the details before I realize something's gone terribly wrong with the sketch, and then I'm wondering, do I have to go back and start over again, or what do I
Well,
need to do?
that's a really good question. And obviously, if I am doing it for someone else, there are more iterations, right?
Right.
Um, but if I'm doing it for myself, honestly, because I work digitally, and you can do takebacks, and you can move things around if you make a mistake. I basically sketch it out. I will typically, let's say, sketch out the shape of the city or whatever it is, and maybe the roads, and the major geographic features, hills, rivers, coastlines, anything like that's going to affect the shape of the city and how it would grow. I would sketch that out literally in pencil and then jump in, because my jumping in is perfectly something I can take back, so it's easy for me to then get into the inking stage. I'll then start like getting the walls of the city if it's walled. I always draw my coastline and my rivers first. I typically start there, but I'll just jump in, because digitally you could just roll back whatever you like.
Yeah, that's true. I still tend to do a lot of stuff by hand. I think because I'm just trying, and my iPad Pro. I have an iPad Pro with iPad Pencil, which I love, but it's getting a little bit long in the tooth, and now I find the battery and stuff drains super fast. So if I'm not plugged in, it just ends up being one of those things where I just start gnashing my teeth as all the battery, the pencil's dying, the iPad's dying. So yeah, and I don't know. I do like something about the actual having a pencil in hand and having paper. I think I just go too fast, or I don't get enough of. I feel like I need a checklist of, make sure, like you're saying, make sure I've drawn. Do I have all my coastlines? Do I have all my rivers? Do I have all my roads? Is there anything I know needs to be there that I haven't accounted for? And kind of go down. I need to make myself like a post-it note with, okay, I'm going to go down all these things, and when I have all those, then I'm gonna start, because I think sometimes I just get ahead of myself and I just want to start into the
Now you've
details. And
seen
then
you've seen my how-to videos, right, on YouTube.
I have.
Because some of the early stages of those, I talk about, because typically I will pencil in the shape of the city. I'll get coastline and rivers drawn in. I'll typically, it all in pencil. I'll typically draw where I want the main hills to be, even. And then I will then mark where I want my main gates, let's say, to the city to be, my main roads in. And I'll actually join them up in the city. I'll mark off where my main roads are all over. I'll mark off my farm areas. Even if it's just a circle, I'm going to do farms here. I'm going to do like hills over here. I'm going to have my graveyard here. And while I'm doing it digitally, my process is exactly the same as if I was doing it in pencil. I'll sketch them all in. Where do I want my warehouse district? What shape is it going to be? Where's my palace? Where are my big POIs? Maybe I'll erase some roads at this point and draw roads around my POIs. I get all of that dialed in, but I would say it might be just a case of, what main features are you marking in pencil, and which ones are causing you to go back later on and realizing it's a mistake? Because I'll be honest with you, once I'm hitting the ink, for me, it's a journey. I don't even know to a degree how this thing is going to turn out. I know where the castle is, You know, I know where maybe the palace is or where the temples are, but I don't know how this thing is going to shape out when you start filling out all of those little neighborhoods. That's part of the joy of it for me.
Yeah, maybe I got to get looser. Maybe I got to get looser. I don't know. I'm such a neophyte, but I feel like I get caught up in that. My daughter's a lot like that too, where she wants to draw something, and if it's not to her mind perfect, then it's a complete, disaster. And I feel like I get caught up too much in. I mean, they're not even. Look, this is not even for me. I'm not trying to get any cartography jobs. I'm just trying to do something for my own game, or even just for myself. But I still find that frustration building into me. Maybe I need to work with my daughter, and we could both figure out how to turn our frustrations into a more zen, cartography experience. We need to do more, watch more of that, the joy of painting, maybe as we.
Very much that. I mean, honestly, sometimes it is. I think you have to remember, really, at the end of the day, what is holistically this going to be a picture of, right? I mean, you never saw Bob Ross worrying about an individual branch on a tree. And it wasn't even necessarily about the tree or the trees there. It was the trees and the mountains and maybe the river or the lake in the distance. And it was a compilation of all of the components. I draw individual buildings all of the time that I don't like the shape of. All of the time. But it's not about the individual building. It's not even about the city block with all of the other buildings around it. It's when you zoom out holistically, how does this feel? So I can let myself go on a line that I don't like or an alleyway that I'm just not buying, because ultimately at the end of the day, as long as the whole thing isn't filled with that, is how does the big picture look? If you're drawing an individual building, it's got to be pretty dialed in. Do you have to worry about the actual strands of hay on a thatched roof? No. But when you zoom out, does it look like a thatched roof? Yes. And that's the trick. You've got to learn to let go of those little details and remember the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think I got to do that. By the way, the Bob Ross documentary on Netflix, if you haven't seen it, it's really fascinating.
I haven't yet, and I'm gonna watch it because honestly, I actually used to work with him going in the background because there's a whole Twitch channel dedicated to him, so you could just have his videos going.
It really is fascinating. I mean, both the kind of he seems to have been very what's the word I'm looking for? He was kind of who he was. I mean, what's funny is apparently he used to make his voice seem more sensual. Like that was like a choice he made for his voice, kind of dialing it down and kind of pulling up the sort of Barry White kind of smoothness meter. But other than that, he was very authentic. But he ended up in business with people who were not very nice, who still I think kind of control all the Bob Ross stuff, which is unfortunate. But it really is a great documentary. So you mentioned you had a lot of gaming going on this weekend. So what's on the gaming radar?
Oh, I do, my friend. I play every other weekend, which I'm actually grateful just to even have a group that I can get together every other weekend. How many people struggle just even have a regular game of any description? But I've got a good group of friends here in the city, and every other weekend we play. And right now I'm running Masks of Nyarlathotep, which is obviously a big Call of Cthulhu game. And what we do is I run a chapter of that, let's say at all of London, and it might take a few months or something. And when we're done with that, then Jack, my husband, will actually jump in and he runs a chapter of his Shadowrun game. So then I get to play for a while and then prepare for the next chapter of my game. So when he's done with his, my chapter starts. So we kind of alternate every 3 to 6 months into a new game, which is actually kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a nice rhythm. So is it your weekend? Is it your turn?
It is. They arrived in Cairo, Egypt, only a few sessions ago. So let's say about a month, 6 weeks back, something like that. And they've hardly done anything. If anyone's played Call of Cthulhu, typically, even if it's a one-off session, the first part is always investigating what is happening, like where did this person go missing? Let's go to the scene and investigate. Did anyone witness this? Let's go talk to them. So it's a very investigative game, which I really, really like. And my players do too. And they're in that stage right now. They've got to Cairo. They've got some leads. and they're beginning to chase down those leads and talking to people, and occasionally new clues and leads are coming into the mix. So they're all sitting there making their notes and stuff. This is the second big session in Cairo that we're about to do.
Oh, that's awesome. So since there could be some fairly big gaps between your game sessions, not even counting just every other week, but then potentially a couple of months break, do you do anything special, recap, or handle, how do you handle like getting everybody back in the frame of mind of being in, 1927 Cairo on the trail of whichever Cthulhuoid horror is lurking around the corner, and maybe resetting kind of what they know and what they were doing when there might be a multi-week or even multi-month gap between your sessions?
That is a brilliant question, by the way. That is a brilliant question. And I'm not sure how many GMs out there of any system do this. So I've got a few tricks that I do. First and foremost, if we're leading up into a new chapter of my game, I start sending out, we have a group email that everyone is on. We also have a group on Facebook as well, where everyone is present. But I start sending out messages like at least once a week of some kind of creepy Cthulhu quote that may or may not relate to the game, and a creepy Cthulhu picture, just to start creeping folks out and getting their brain into the mood of it, right? Between sessions, in fact, I should say at the beginning of a chapter, typically there's some kind of redlining that is going on. You've traveled from New York to London. Typically, I will do some kind of adventure that isn't part of the Masks campaign in that red line area. And it's almost like a little warm-up, get people back into the swing of Call of Cthulhu, Between sessions, I will send recaps. I don't do them right after the game. I do them about a week later because my games are 2 weeks apart. And it gets everyone's brains back into, oh, yeah, that's who we spoke to. That's what we were doing. But I do them really nicely formatted. And by the way, you may not know this. I'm actually releasing them on my Patreon too. I'm doing these after action reports. So of the last 2 years, I'm going to start like putting them out to my patrons so they can actually read them as well. But I'll have a nice spooky picture at the top. I'll have some kind of subject line that makes your skin crawl. And then I'll recap how the game went, and what they did. Sometimes I'll attach the clues that they found and things like that. And that then gets you back into the game that is coming up. And if I feel like I need to snap their attention a little bit more, I'll sneak in a little other email, typically from one of the NPCs or Nyarlathotep himself or something, just saying something to them, just to get their juices going. So that's how I kind of keep people engaged on it.
Yeah, it's hard, and I know my game. It's me and a bunch of other, or bunch is only where there's 4 of us total, but we all have families, and 2 of them are newish dads. So we lost a couple of weeks because kids were sick, and things like that happen. So it's an ongoing struggle, to try to get people back in the groove. And I think a big struggle for people is how much information to give them, because I know that I'm kind of the old school games where we were expected to always have our own notes, and I played for years with a GM, we might come to a session and we might say, we just talked to this guy 5 minutes ago. What was his name? And he would turn to us and say, I don't know. What is his name? Did you write it down? And then it would be that scramble of, oh gosh, did we write it down? Because like, if you didn't write it down, well, you lost it. You forgot, or whatever happened, and then one of us would hopefully pull up a scrap of paper from our binder saying, yes, I did write it down, and his name was, Sir so-and-so or whatever. And he'd be like, all right, yeah, you got it. Or, some kind of embarrassment if we threw out the wrong name. But especially with COVID and everything, when getting groups together consistently is hard, I feel like your approach is really a good one, to kind of maybe let go of the fact that normally if you're playing every week and on a regular schedule, especially with maybe an investigative type campaign, you'd want to put the onus on the players to keeping track of all the information they've gathered. But just as a practical approach, when you have these distances between games that could be a little bit long, is you want to keep the game moving, and you don't want them going back over the same ground they went before, asking the same questions if they got the answers. So why not help them out and just make sure everybody knows what everybody knows, and that way you can keep it moving, so to speak.
Exactly. And you keep brains engaged with the game You know, they start getting excited for the next game coming up. And all of my players actually do take their like notes during the game if they're talking to a reporter and they're asking them questions. They're writing notes that way. I don't get too much into the granular details necessarily. I kind of give this, and he kind of recapped this. But like later on, if they're well, for starters, if they're like, what's his name again? I'll just tell them because it's not worth fighting people over that. You know, their characters would remember, even if you don't. But if it's a so he mentioned a guy. What was that guy's name? What I will do in that instance, I'll just be blunt in so much that he never told you, or he did tell you. You guys wrote it down, and I'll let them go scrambling to find it because that one is a memory now of the conversation that took place versus the guy's name. But I'll let them know. I'll lead them to the water, so to speak. I'll just let them do the drinking on their own. It's like, yeah, he told you the name. You definitely wrote it down. And then I'll go going through it and someone will go there. Oh, yeah, it was Nigel Wasif. Yeah, that's the fella. And they're off.
How far down in the game is Egypt when they get there? Like, how is this early game, late game? I read through, or at least I flipped through that. I mean, it's a massive campaign, ages and ages ago, but I cannot remember. Is that early game? Or are you still in kind of early mid game, or where are they in the campaign when they get to Egypt?
Well, I'll say this about Masks. For starters, it is a big game. It is world hopping, which is one of the wonderful things about it. But it's also grown. The 7th edition version is now 2 books, and it's like this. It's massive. They've rounded out a lot. They've added a prelude chapter to it as well. It's meant to get everyone warmed up to what's going on. And so it's bigger than ever now. It's bigger than ever. But it's sandbox. In theory, you could go from New York to Shanghai. You could go from New York to Australia, because there are tentative clues there. New York to Africa to Australia to London. That order wouldn't necessarily make sense, but I know groups that have done it. So there's no real order per se, but I think the more traditional order would be New York to London to Cairo, and then from Cairo to Africa, maybe Shanghai, Australia. So my group, I want to say, is about a third of the way through, a quarter maybe of the way through the game, but I don't know where they're going next, which is why it really works for me when I finish a chapter and someone else runs a game for a few months, because now I can say, so where are you guys going to go next? And they'll say, probably Australia. And I can start swatting up on Australia, and I got a few months to get my game.
Yeah, that's nice. How's the layout? Because sometimes when these, and I don't mean just the typography, but simply especially when you have to, you might be coming back to different chapters, or as you said, it's more kind of sandboxy. Is it laid out in such a way that it's easy to kind of get the information you need and kind of get up to speed on different areas? Because sometimes I find with these, especially with these massive books, they've got so much information in it, but then you have to do a ton of flipping back and forth to kind of find what you need. And it can be, you almost want to do the old school thing and basically take the binding off and put it in a 3-ring folder or something, so you can literally swap the pages to get what you want. Did they find a good way to sort of give you all this bulk of information, and doing it in such a way to make it at least somewhat easy to find on the spot? Or do you just prep so that you don't really need to worry about that part?
Well, I think there's a mixture of both, right? There's definitely prep with it. And the funny story, by the way, with Masks is, so I finally convinced my group that we're going to play Call of Cthulhu. And so they're all on board. But it's been like 20 years since I've run Call of Cthulhu at this point. So I actually got into some Call of Cthulhu groups, and I'm like, okay, so I've run this a lot in the past. I've never run 7th edition. What's a good way of me kind of getting back into this, and, with a new group that I've never played before? And people are, saying, well, do this, do the haunting, and do these various sort of small one-off scenarios. And I'm like, screw it. I'm going to run Masks, which has got to be one of the biggest games out there. But I will say this, and this is honest. It's not just because I love Chaosium, because I am going to follow it up with a critique at the end. For the most part, they've found a really good formula. And for starters, broadly speaking, it's well laid out in very distinct chapters. They give you an introduction, what's going on, what is the plot, who's involved, gives you a sense of what's happening. Then you've got these big chapters. This is the Peru chapter. This is New York. This is, so you could go to any of these at any time. But all of the spell books or the magical items, so to speak, the occult items that you may find along the way are summarized in the appendix at the end. So if, like, you know, a player was always, so what's this Mask of Hayama again? I know, I don't have to even remember what chapter it was in. Just go to the magical items section, the artifact section at the back there. It's going to be there. Go to the spell book section or whatever. They're talking about, you know, the standing stones. I know where to go. That makes it easy. Then at the beginning of every single chapter, they have a summary that talks about how people could have got to this point, what locations, like what chapters, and what people and what clues would have brought them here. And it's and then where, it's almost like a little matrix. Where does it go after this? What are the clues that lead, and where does it go? And it kind of gives you this level set, because you go, okay, so London, there are New York clues coming in, and these were the people that had these clues. And it kind of really helps you understand as a GM, like how these pieces are meshing together. Then when they get into the details of the chapter, they always give you a little overview. This is what's going on. There's lots of keeper notes, you know. They introduce the NPCs. They tell you about each one and like the roles they're playing, including the keeper notes only stuff. Then they get into these little micro chapters. You know, so it's like, so if they go talk to Nigel Wasif over at the Cairo Bulletin, this is a chapter for him. If they go to the museum, here's a chapter for that. If they go here, here's a chapter for that. And it makes it very easy. Now, I find that you have to read it in advance, right? And I've read Cairo 6 times now, something like that, and I'm reading it again in preparation for coming up for Saturday's game. So it's always, because I don't like reading from the book. I want to be able to narrate. I want to be able to talk loud. I want to be able to enunciate and be, you know, occupying the table, so to speak. Like right. GMs that do this, and he says to you that no, stop doing that. So I there's definitely prep that I do, and I have little notes, like little sticky notes stuck on my pages that tell me where the people in the chapters are, so I don't have to be looking in the like the table of contents. I can just go, oh, they went to the museum, flick, I'm at the museum, and I'm not like searching through the book or anything. I find, honestly, the layout is great. The way they presented it is great. My only criticism is each chapter can have side effects. What am I talking about? Side missions. You know, whatever they are, every chapter has them, and they're good things to have, right? They're not really going to affect the plot. They may have nothing to do with the plot, but it's something you could do while you're here. And they vary in the frequency and sort of how severe they are. But they put them right in the middle of a chapter, and I find it to be disruptive. So, I mean, if I make something up now, I'll just completely make something up, and I'll pick on London for the sake of argument. You know, sure, the stolen black cab is mentioned in a newspaper cutting. So if the players go off to try and find the stolen black cab, by the way, this is completely made up. This sounds like a terrible adventure, but you know, if they go off to do it, fine. We've got another little micro adventure they can do in London. It has nothing to do with the Masks of Nyarlathotep, but they'll put it right in the middle of the chapter, and they do it every time. So you'll be like, okay, so if they talk to this person, black cab, flick, 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 flick. Okay, now this is back to London proper now. Yeah, and I think I would almost prefer to have those side adventures at the end of the chapter in a way, you know?
Maybe put a note where you feel like you'd want to insert them, right? If there's like a location, like if you're at Victoria Station and you want to pad it out or do something, then go to the end of the chapter and find the black cab. But yeah, I could see how if you're in the flow of the main mission, you don't suddenly want to run into 5 pages about the black cab that are just there for you to have to flip past to get back to whatever it was you were actually looking for. It's
a gripe. It's a little bit of a petty one, but you know, I do find each time it's kind of a little bit disruptive, and I know why they're doing it, because when you finish with a chapter, you fight the big bad boss or whatever it is, you foil their plans. That's the end of the chapter. It talks about the recap and what sanity you're going to get back. You don't want to go off then into side missions, you know, because we're just wrapped. The credits are already coming up. What are we doing now? With these trailer.
You've defeated Cthulhu's lieutenant. Don't you want to now find the black cab? No,
right,
we don't.
right. So I get it. I kind of do. It's odd placements, but maybe there's nothing they could do.
I forget? How do you level up? And I know it doesn't, strictly speaking, have levels. You just get how's the experience? How do you get more? I've only played the intro, I think, whatever the haunting. So it has something to do with a lake or a quarry or something. I think that was in the 7th edition book. I had a lot of fun, but obviously one of the things you don't get to do at the end of that is level up your character anyway. So I don't remember. How do characters get better in Call of Cthulhu? I know you have the D100 and with the stats that are all numerical. I assume you get some kind of skill points, certain stages that you get to add to your various skills.
Yeah, pretty close. I actually like this system quite a bit. So let's say there are a bunch of skills, and like drive auto is one of them. Shooting a gun is another one. Swimming, talking in a different language, typical skills, right? Everything is rated on a percentile basis, and obviously the higher, the better. If you could speak French, 75%, that's good. If you could shoot a gun, 75%. Holy heck, because the way that it works is roll a percentile and you have to get equal to or less than your skill in it. So you got a 75% chance of hitting that dude with that gun. That's a good shot. If you got a 35% chance, not so good. So that works well. When you do a skill check and you succeed, put a little check next to the skill on your character sheet. And then what happens is at the end of a chapter, at appropriate times where the keeper feels like the group is resting and there is a lull, a suitable between chapter moments for the investigators to sort of contemplate what they have learned, then you have an opportunity to increase each skill you've checked. So you have to use it to increase it. Typically. And what I like about that is now, so let's say for the sake of argument, your skill is 35%. You did happen to get a hit. Good job. When the keeper now sort of says, okay, everyone, I think you're resting in a motel for a week or so. I think this is a good time to do a little bit of a skill up check. Well, now you roll a percentile against every skill that has a check. Every skill you use successfully, you have to roll over it. And because now the higher your skill, the harder it is for you to level it up. And I like that. It's such a simple mechanic, but it works. At 35% with your gun, odds on you're going to increase. When you're 75% with a gun, it's going to be harder. You're going to have to use it more to be able to get that breakthrough, right? And it becomes one of those, so you're 90% with a gun, it's going to be really difficult. You're going to have to use it a lot to be able to level it up. So it's almost like you have to throw more experience points into it to get it to like level, but in a very simple way of doing a check. And if you do roll higher than your skill, add a D10 points to it. That simple. Add a D10. And it goes up a D10 points. So if you've got 35 skill and you roll 44 on the check, it's leveling up. Roll a D10, you roll 5, great, now your skill's 40. And it's done, and you get rid of a little checkbox. It's super simple.
Yeah, that's really nice because it does a good job of balancing that urge to concentrate only on what you're good at, right? Because you're looking at it and you're 70% whatever, and you're 30% the other one. When you have a chance to use one or the others, you're probably going to tend to gravitate towards that 70% one, what you're good at. But then it's harder to level that one up. Whereas if you take a chance on using that one you're lower on, chances are you're going to fail. But if you do succeed, then at the end of the whatever the chapter, whenever you get that lull, it gives you that chance to increase it, which you probably want to do, because who wants to just be the person that can only do one particular thing? And what about like health? Do you get more? Is health fixed? I don't remember. None of us got physically
health
hurt
is fixed. Yeah, health is fixed. So this is the same with their RuneQuest system too. Uses the same stats, sort of the same sort of skill system percentile. But it's like, so, let's say your strength is 90. Well, your strength is 90. And if your con is 75, your con is 75. Odds on, it's not going to change unless something bad happens to you or something particularly good happens, but it's fixed. A combination of your con and size gives you hit points. So they're going to be fixed. You're no tougher at the end. You're probably weaker, if anything, than you started at the beginning. So it has a very different tone to it. It's not all about leveling, trying to get XP to break a certain level and get the guaranteed rewards within that level. It's way more story. Play the story. At certain points, you may improve within the skills you're using, but it's not about, and now your strength is up to 90 and you get +1 to your attack. And it's different, but it's everything I've seen about the players that do shift like from Dungeons and Dragons style games into this really like it, because it changes the focus. It almost pulls you away from your character sheets and into the narrative, into the story. And everyone I've seen absolutely loves that.
Yeah, 5th edition, maybe more than any other version of Dungeons and Dragons, you really are, in a sense, reliant on those attribute scores. They've gotten more and more important. Well, now you'll see people say, "Oh, well, if you don't have a 16 in your prime stat, you might as well start over."
Throw away character, right?
Throw away the character sheet. They don't have a 16. So it is. So I think for some people some people, they love that kind of character generate, kind of charge in sort of Tetris, whatever, you're making everything fit. But I think there are a lot of other people, and I'm certainly in that camp, that would rather just not futz with it. I'm like, I'll just go with the guy I've got, and if I get a little bit better down the line, great. But otherwise, I'll try to figure out what they're good at, and I'll do it. And then, what I'm not good at, I'll let somebody else do it, or maybe I'll take a shot at doing it when I feel like it's not going to be horrible, so that I can try to get better at it. How much combat do you have in Mass? I know when there's not generally a lot. There's I feel like, at least in the one I played, there was maybe one. It wasn't even much of a combat. It was just kind of either did any of us have our wherewithal to do kind of one thing, and live, or run away screaming, or all our hair turns white. But do you find that with the amount of combat that is in the game, that's difficult for folks who are transitioning from something, maybe like you're also playing Shadowrun, which definitely has much more of a combat component in there?
Right, totally. Way different. And I'm playing a street samurai type, so yeah, it's way different. No, I mean, I think the tone of the game helps people shift into one of the story. It's almost like you're playing CSI or something, and it's like it's an Agatha Christie, it's a murder mystery, Murder on the Orient Express type of thing. And it's like, so the first part of the game, as I alluded to earlier, is very much sort of the investigation and what's going on. But then the finale typically is you confronting the thing or the person behind it all. A little bit like Scooby-Doo, right? Aha! I would have got away with it too if it wasn't for those pesky kids. Well, that aha moment, and I want to say the second half of the investigation can go very differently depending on what you're playing. And I want to say with Masks, because it is so big, and you'll be running it for months and months and months and months and months and months and months, if not years. The scope of that second half per chapter can vary wildly. And I'll tell you, and this won't be any spoilers, I won't mention any names, but I'll use my London chapter as a prime example. First half of that London chapter took a few weeks of them just figuring out who is who, like who could they trust. By the way, they got it wrong. They actually took an occultist into their ranks. Who they could trust, who they could get along with, what's going on here in London, who are the movers and shakers. And then it started to ramp up from there, because they were like breaking into office places, looking through safes and things like that, sneaking past guards. Still no outright conflict, but the tension is beginning to creep up a little bit. They figure out, actually, shit's going down at this big house outside of town. Well, let's go there. And they actually figure out that there's actually sacrifices and stuff going on there. So they get the cops. They actually get some cops involved. And with Scotland Yard, they all head out on a certain night when they know this sacrifice is going down. Big, huge gunfight, creatures getting summoned, dynamite getting thrown, you name it. It was typical Call of Cthulhu. But that was like the last session, of that. Now, that was a big fight. It was a big deal. And Egypt is going to be very, very similar. There are big things that kind of come at the end. For you, playing The Haunting, that big thing was kind of, like it was this kind of at the end, And so it's going to be over quicker. There's less lead up to it. You're getting the whole thing done in 4 to 6 hours. So the bigger the game, the bigger the lead up, the bigger the finale, I think. But it is different because with Dungeons and Dragons, it's way more. By the way, I used to play Dungeons and Dragons all the time. I love Dungeons and Dragons. My roots are in Dungeons and Dragons. And so I get it. I played a lot of 5th edition as well. But it's different. It's more computer game like. Go into the room, meet the orcs, kill the orcs, get the XP, loot the treasure, listen at the door, And I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's like ding, 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 take up my gold, ding, 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 take up my XP. Like how quickly and what skills can I use to zap this guy or fireball that group over there? This Call of Cthulhu you might get that at the end, but it's really about the journey of getting there,
But do you have to reset your players on that idea that because they may be in a spot with I can just imagine somebody, say, coming from a D&D 5th edition game, they're in a situation where maybe they're trying to get into a museum, they're trying to get into the British Museum at night, and they find one of the night watchman types, and they're trying to wheedle their way, through, oh, I'm a friend of Dr. So-and-so. I just left something in his office. Can't we please go in and get it? And, no. And the guy, whoever's the Dungeons and Dragons player, whatever, is there. And it's like, but I've got a gun. Let's just gank this guy and go in. And now, obviously, that is something you can do. But did you find that you had to kind of just explain to people, like, well, you can do that, but think about all these different elements and call that maybe that's not a great idea to do? Or do you just, maybe that was something that they got out of their system in the very first chapter, where maybe there was somebody who went and tried to go sort of super sort of militant in the spirit of other games, not necessarily recognizing that maybe you got to play things differently? Or did you have like a session 0 or some kind of reset, like coming back from Shadowrun and saying, okay, now in Shadowrun, we would have just gone in and guns a-blazing, but now we're back into the Call of Cthulhu universe, so, reset our brains back to us being sort of normal guys with very fixed hit points, and you got to go to the hospital if you get hurt, and, we don't want the world to know that, the British Museum was assaulted at night, and, whatever, right? Do you find yourself having to do that, or your players just naturally just kind of get in that groove now that you've been playing for a while?
I think it's a balance, in all truth. Like before we even started playing Call of Cthulhu, I actually sent out some primers to folks that kind of explained the different feel of the game. Much like you're saying there, like this is what we have been playing, just to give you an idea. Your hit points aren't going to go up. A shotgun does 2d8 or whatever it is. It's probably going to kill you if it hits you. It's like 4d6, actually, I think it is, if a double-barreled shotgun. It's like, so just to keep things in perspective, it can get deadly real fast. If you're going to get into conflict, know you can win. Do it on your terms. And so I really explain this to them. Research what's going on so you know what you're going into. And if suddenly it becomes something you're not aware of, feel free to run away. So I kind of started to reset their brains on it. Now, during the game, I will be fair, my players have been really, really good at just like, picking up the general vibe of it. And I don't have anyone running around with a Tommy gun, like mowing people down. But if I did have a player that's just said, why don't we just shoot the guard? Or shoot him. Because that does come up. Of course it does. I don't want to steer the players. They can absolutely do it if they want to. But all I'll do is we have a little sort of term that we say OOC, and that just stands for out of character. Like, right. Just for a moment, I'm going to say a real world thing about the game, but like nothing to do with what's going on right now. But I'll do OOC. You can absolutely shoot the guard if you want, but remember that this would be murder. It will then provoke the local police. This may bring down unwanted attention on you guys. So with that said, back into game, what do you want to do? And I don't find I have to do that often, but not sometimes just resetting the moment, just anchor the moment, just for a moment. It's like there are causes and effects. do you want to proceed? And honestly, most times I'll go, oh yeah, shit, forgot about the police. Forget about that. But I might knock him out, you know, and it'll just change things a little bit. And because I'll be honest with you, in the past, we've kind of run games completely gloves off. The GM is gloves off. The players are gloves off. We're all mature players. Let's just go at it. And it can actually get disruptive, even with really mature players, you know, upsetting each other. And the GM can see that one player is about to ruin what this other player has been doing for a while. And it's going to create a lot of... And we've done that. And we all learned from it. And we came to the conclusion, it's okay if we say, hold on a moment, guys. OOC, Dave, do you really want to do that? Because that could turn out bad. And we do that not even just in Call of Cthulhu, just in general. And it allows Dave a moment to go, oh, yeah, maybe I won't. No, you're right. I'll leave it. And so I think our group is good, just having that sort of maturity.
I mean, I think that's a great tool. I mean, I don't have a term OOC, but I know I've done that where I've kind of slowed the game down a bit. Someone might be getting a little bit ahead of things, or maybe they're about to jump in, and I'll say, okay, just so you have the full context. If you do this, you know, think about the sound it's going to make, think about what's going to happen, and now, okay, like you want to. I think sometimes that slowing it down, because players can definitely kind of get ahead of themselves, and then that can leave some other players behind, and that's when you can get that frustration. All right, we're coming up against the edge of the hour. Chat's been quiet, but that's okay because that just leaves more time for me. Man, I could just keep going on about this stuff forever. I know you do a lot of mini stuff, so and I'm almost completely mini ignorant. But I want to ask you how I've seen your stuff on painting minis. I see you have an amazing mini collection. How long have you been collecting minis? How long has that been part of your...
Oh, like these guys over my shoulder here. Okay, so the story about the minis is back when I first started playing the red box, blue box, back in the early 80s, I went to a game store to get Dungeons and Dragons, and they had some miniatures there. And like, honestly, back then it was like, oh my God, what am I looking at? Because there was a little skeleton with a sword above his head. There was like a knight type with the shield here and the sword there. There was a minotaur with the axe. I think we've all seen that one. It's kind of an iconic thing. And I bought them. Even though most of my miniatures on the table were like chess pieces and things like that.
Were these the old like pewter?
Yes.
Like
yeah.
Okay.
Don't lick your fingers after handling type of thing. Yeah. But I got enraptured by these things, man. I was just like, they're beautiful. But also, I mean, I was the carry geek girl nerd at school, didn't have that many friends. And the friends I did have were also geek nerds, and they were war gamers. So they've got these massive Napoleonic armies, you know, or World War II armies. We played at a wargaming club for many, many years at the beginning. And so I was surrounded by this whole concept of miniatures. And I just started spending like my pocket money or my wages from the newspaper delivery on miniatures. I just started buying them. Well, the Traveler 15mm ones, like, oh my God, they're just this big. They're so cute. I just started buying them, and I just got hooked. I got hooked and just collecting them and hoarding them. So I've been at it since the 80s. But answering the question of how many do I have is a little unfair in a way, because I'm also a war gamer. So I have thousands just of ancient armies, Romans and Greeks and things like that. I have thousands in Napoleonics, because I love Napoleonics too. But we have hundreds and hundreds of Battletech miniatures, hundreds and hundreds of Shadowrun miniatures, hundreds and hundreds of like dragons and your typical sort of fantasy ones. I have crates of unpacked miniatures everywhere. And recently I've just started getting into like your 54mm, your 78mm sort of style ones where you're painting them more for show.
And you brought them all over the sea when you came to the States? Or
Actually,
do you still have some back?
No, none of them are back there. But the true story about that is I left them in storage with my mom and dad for like 10 years. 10 years I never saw them. And then I finally got settled actually here in Portland, Oregon. And I was like, Mom, Dad, let's ship them across. God knows how much that cost. But they shipped them across. And I got them here, and I was with Jack at the time, and we just started unpacking these boxes and boxes and boxes of miniatures. And I'm talking about crates, plastic crates of miniatures, all laid out with the lead in there. And it was honestly, man, that was one of the greatest experiences of my life, because it was a throwback to shit that I had not seen in such a long time ago.
Christmas.
Oh yeah, this guy. It was Christmas. It was Christmas. It was brilliant.
Yeah, see, I missed the whole minis phase. I just never had anybody that had minis. We were all living in small New York apartments. We were kids, didn't have any attachments to any kind of wargaming clubs. Did they have like a sandbox? You could use one of those real like sand tables that you could that they were playing on, or was it just like the field of green?
It was more like you feel the green, particularly back then, because like I want to say the manufacturing techniques on like the wargaming terrain wasn't quite what it is nowadays. So it was sometimes it was just a ping pong ball table, complete with the white lines on it, and you put your miniatures on the top. It was way more simplistic, but it was also like a community hall too. So it was like you're breaking this stuff down at the end of the evening and going home for the next week. So it was way more basic, no sand tables or anything like that.
I feel you on that one. All right, I'm going to let you go because I know that you were just switching over from work. I will send you. I guess we'll do it about a month from now. I will find a date offline where we can get together, and I definitely want to hit you up more on minis. I actually had that on my list, but I love hearing about Call of Cthulhu, and I love some of these games that are on kind of my bucket list to really delve into. So I was about tempted to start asking about Shadowrun, since it seemed like you must have just gotten through playing some Shadowrun since you were getting for your game, but I will save that for the next one. Anyhow, have a great evening. Thanks again for hopping on. Shoot me over any links, and I'll put them in the show notes. I do have links to your Patreon and your website in the description already, but if there's anything coming up, if Chaosium has a page for this new thing that you're working on for them, I'm happy to link to that.
I will always share it with you.
Awesome. But thanks so much again for joining. Thanks everybody who hung out. Didn't get many questions in the chat, but like I said, that just leaves more of me for my questions. So I appreciate everyone who hung out. Take it easy, everyone, and I'll talk to you later.